Hey everybody, it's your boy Captain Hunter coming at you again. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. I really appreciate it. Today, I got an episode for you today that I wanted to discuss about why people dislike or distrust the system, not just the police, not just the politicians, but an overall system, right? So I teach criminal justice, which is a system. It's the criminal justice system. It's the police, it's corrections, and it's the courts, right? The police being the executive arm of the government, the courts being the judicial arm of the government, and of course, corrections are also part of the executive part of the government. And you think about the three branches of government, be it the local, the state, or the federal. It's the executive, legislative, and it's the judicial. All three of these form what we call the government, three branches of government, and they employ what we call checks and balances, right? So therefore, no one entity in any one party has a monopoly on power, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens is people often act in collusion, and this is where we have designed this three-tiered system, three-branch system, in order to make sure that no one person or persons can act in cohort and in corruption, right? It often happens, and we're going to talk today about a story in which this happens, right? So this is a story that I came across, and this says this town runs largely on traffic fines. If you fight your ticket, that the mayor is your judge. So remember, I just went over the three branches of government, right? So so if you get a traffic fine, which is the executive branch, right, the police give you the ticket, you should be able to go to a different branch of government and determine whether your rights have been violated, whether the executive branch or the police officers, the sheriff's deputies, whatever, acted correctly. Same thing with corrections. You get confined to corrections. They beat you up. They don't give you your medications. They don't give you your constitutionally afforded rights, even when you're behind bars, right? You still have the right to be treated humanely. You should go to a judge. That's why you have lawsuits, and you can go to a judge, and they will determine whether the entities in that particular party acted correctly. So, let me mute this so I don't get any more notifications here. So this story this is what this comes down to, right? And this is why people don't like them. Now I wanted to preface this story before we read about it, and this is coming from ProPublica. I actually like their investigative journalism there. Not enough of that going on here independently, in my estimation. But I want to go to a story here, and this is by a guy. His name is Richard Rothstein. I believe he was a former judge, I believe, or he's an academic now, but a former judge. So this is a good article because it says the making of Ferguson 10 years ago almost. In 2014, there was a situation with Michael Brown in the summertime, was shot down by police. And if you remember, if you're old enough to remember, if you're watching this, right, there was a hands up, don't shoot type of scenario that went down, right? Now, that was, I'll talk about that in a second here, but I want to talk about the making of Ferguson. Ferguson police were found to be using the same type of methods that we're going to discuss here that was going on in this town in Louisiana, in which they were targeting individuals within a community, in particular the black population. They were targeting the black population. They were targeting the poorer classes of people and making them pay for everything through their, not everything, but I believe that if I remember correctly, the 25% of the city's revenue came from tickets, fines, etc., and those were heavily levied against the black population within Ferguson. So here's an executive. Well, we're not going to read the executive summary, but I want to remind. This is a good article, right? So you can go to Economic Policy Institute or just type in your Google search bar, "The Making of Ferguson: Public Policies at the Root of Its Troubles." You can read the whole thing right there. Can you see it on the screen here? No, I'm blocking it here. Maybe I'll move over here. So you can see, right, the executive summary: how Ferguson became Ferguson, federal, state, and local policy segregated Ferguson. Remember I talked about a system, right? There's a system, right? It's a system. If you think about your body, right? Your circulatory system within your body, right? It's not only your heart, but it's the heart, the veins, and everything else that helps to pump the blood and get the blood from one part of the body to another. And there are many systems. I always quiz my kids about this, but I can't remember how many systems the human body has. But I don't want to get detracted, so Google that. How many systems the human body has, right? Circulatory system, reproductive system, your digestive system. Anyway, I won't go down that, but there's a couple more systems. So you can read through all this, and so it's good. It's a good article, right? So how Ferguson became Ferguson, and they go back to 1968, right? And it goes back to all the different things that have happened to African Americans. And what I'm saying this because I'm saying that these systems have been put in place to restrict certain individuals from upper mobility and movement within society. And when you understand what happened to Ferguson, you will understand what happens to many ghettos throughout the country. Oakland, California, Pittsburgh, even where I'm from, parts of New Haven and Bridgeport, New York, Baltimore, right? How did these cities become these slums and ghettos, right? Not all of them, obviously. Milwaukee, parts of it, right? So federal, state, and local policies segregated Ferguson, and St. Louis. Examining the district public policies that enforced segregation, right? So it's got all this. Look at these homes now. The entire block ruined by Negro invasion. Actual photograph, right? Save your home, vote for segregation, right? So all this type of stuff, right? So segregating public houses, and again, this is an academic article, so it's not just something, right? Restrictive covenants. If you don't know what all these terms mean, then number one, your education system has failed you because they're not telling you the full and true story about has gone on, and you need to read this. You need to read this and understand what these things are. Subsidized of suburban development for whites only. Denial of adequate municipal services in the ghetto. Annexation, spot zoning, explosive zoning, incorporation and redevelopment. Urban renewal, redevelopment programs, right? So read this over. I'm not going to go through all that. So what I wanted to talk about is what's going on in this town in Louisiana, and so my point is that the Darren Wilson Michael Brown situation found out. Here's the two things I found out. Right, number one is that, again, I'm talking about systems here. Here's the two things. This is the executive summary, or you can read this, right? You can download the whole thing and read the full report of the DOJ, what they found when they went into Ferguson, Missouri. After Michael Brown was killed, there was riots in the streets, and then the federal government gets involved. The Department of Justice goes in there and takes a look at the Ferguson Police Department. They have surveys, interviews with people, ride-alongs. They go through court paperwork, police paperwork, and all this type of stuff, right? They do a full and thorough, comprehensive investigation, soup to nuts, and they found two things. Justice Department findings of two civil rights investigations in Ferguson. Here's the main things that they found. Number one is that the hands up narrative did not happen. So the Justice Department also announced that the evidence examined in its independent federal investigation into the fatal shooting of Michael Brown does not support federal civil rights charges against Ferguson officer Darren Wilson. That was one of the most important things that they found out, that it was not accurate and true, that there was no hands up. He did not, but that and unfortunately, Michael Brown had made a terrible decision in attacking the officer. So the reason that they speculate that Michael Brown had done this is, again, or had attacked the officer, is again because there was a system of harassment that had gone on. Remember, there was a system of harassment of the police departments, of the police department officers going into different parts of the neighborhoods and conducting, ticketing people for walking on the street, jaywalking, walking in the middle of the street, all this type of stuff, targeting African Americans, right? A systemic problem that was going on. Right. And as the second big thing that they detailed in this report is that, as detailed in our report, this investigation found a community that was deeply polarized and where deep distrust and hostility often characterized interaction between the police and area residents, said Attorney General Eric Holder. Our investigation showed that Ferguson's police officers routinely violate the Fourth Amendment and stopping people without reasonable suspicion. In order for you to be stopped by an officer, stopped, not talked to, But if they're going to perform a stop in which your freedom has been restricted and you are not free to leave, they need reasonable suspicion. Arresting them without probable cause and using unreasonable force against them. Now that our investigation has reached its conclusion, it's time for Ferguson's leaders to take immediate, wholesale, and structural corrective action. The report we have issued and the steps we have taken are only the beginning of a necessary, resource-intensive, and inclusive process to promote reconciliation, to reduce and eliminate bias, and to bridge gaps and build understanding. That is important, right? Because I'm talking today about systems, and I want to bring this home and make this very, very clear that when you have a systemic problem, this is what's going to happen. People are going to eventually revolt, and that's essentially what Michael Brown was, what they believe that Michael Brown was doing. I've heard different people. Obviously, he was never able to be reviewed, but this is the narrative that he was under duress from a system, every day being stopped, every day seeing his cousins stop, his neighbors stop, his uncles, his aunts, people drive down the street, they get stopped, right? Listen, you can read about all this, not only in this particular report, but just look at, the history of Ferguson Police Department. And I'm saying this not to point at them. I know that they've made great strides to turn that department around. However, what I'm saying is that there was an underboiling system of contempt. And if you don't do something about that, it's going to spark off in your face. So here, let's bring us to the story here. So I started to read some of this. I don't know how much of this I'm going to get through, but this is available on ProPublica, right? You can go to ProPublica and you can watch it, right? This is, kind of fancy mechanics going on here in the background, right? So this Louisiana town runs largely on traffic fines. If you fight your ticket, the mayor is the judge. I talked about systems. I talk about how you should be able to go to an independent or disinterested party, which is our government, and say, what's up with this, right? So depending on how large a town is, and this is Fenton, Louisiana, a population of 226 people. So I would assume that a town this small, or they have a very few, if any, aldermen, we call them aldermen here, town council people to help the mayor to govern the town. Maybe 2 or 3, town, if any, right? So let's take a look at this and let's see what's going on here. And I think that this has the potential to be the next Ferguson, in that it can blow up in people's faces. And this really caught my attention. So let's read through this a little bit. The village of Fenton, outside the oil and gas town of Lake Charles, covers only about 20 blocks. Their city hall, the library, one gas station, a small public housing complex, a Dollar General, where did I get green from? A grain elevator, a Baptist church. Drivers headed to East Texas from central Louisiana goes straight through the town, passing it all in under a minute. In many ways, Fenton is like other small towns in Louisiana, but is remarkable in one way. The village has 226 people. This village of 226 people collected more money in a single year through fines and forfeitures, primary traffic tickets, than almost any other municipality in Louisiana, according to audit. So think about this: 226 people, and they collected more money through fines and forfeiture. You got a forfeiture car. People in this have been talking about asset forfeiture. I've covered that in other podcasts that I've done, and how unfair some asset forfeiture processes are, and how criminal I actually think that they are. Primarily traffic tickets than almost any other municipality according to audits. And the year ending in June 2022, Fenton brought in $1.3 million that way. How do you rack up that many $1.3 million worth of tickets in a town of 226 people? The fines were collected through what's known as the mayor's court, a little known type of small town court found only in Louisiana and Ohio. In Fenton, its primarily function is processing the thousands of traffic tickets when written annually by a few police officers, right? How many police officers can you afford to have when you have 226 people? I mean, you shouldn't have more than 3 or 4, right? Here, the mayor is also the judge appointing. Here, the mayor is also the judge, appointing the prosecutor, and if drivers ask for trial, deciding their guilt or innocence. So he may have a prosecutor. It's up for you to get a defendant, a defense attorney, on your own dime, no doubt. And he's going to sit on there as the judge. So the mayor is the judge. The mayor runs the village with the revenue primarily made up of those of fines. The bulk of the salaries of the people in the courtroom, from everyone from the mayor to the clerk, comes from fines and fees collected by the court. So you think that they have any type of disinterested interest? You think that they have any type of interest in making sure that all the people get paid? This arrangement is so ripe for a conflict of interest that the fairness of mayor's court has been challenged several times. One case resulted in a 1972 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that curtailed the power of mayors who take in a lot of money through the court. Fenton Village Attorney Mike Holmes, in an email to WVUE and ProPublica, said the mayor presides over a court in a neutral, impartial manner, consistent with Louisiana law. Who believes that? Who believes that? But the village's court records suggest something else about how it handles some tickets. Case summaries include curious notes from village employees and police officers. Some say not to fix tickets or to reduce charges for drivers who had a bad attitude. Others suggest that the police chief and others have had a hand in dismissing charges, although Holmes said tickets are dismissed only at his direction. I don't think it's abnormal to put on the ticket, the operator had a bad attitude. We used to do it. It was a spot on the attitude of the driver. It was right on there. It was right there on the ticket. Check this box, attitude of the driver, or write it in. Getting clear answers as to how Fenton operates in courts and how fairly has been difficult. Over 4 visits, journalists from WVUE and Public reviewed court files, town meeting minutes, municipal ordinances, and body cam video. We asked for 3.5 years of electronic case summaries. We tried several times to see the court in action and to meet with the mayor, eventually observing court once and speaking with the mayor for 5 minutes. Village officials offered conflicting, confusing explanations for the mayor's role and how the tickets are reduced and dismissed. Why the town asked the state to suspend so many driver's licenses and how often trials are held. Their description of how the town runs its court didn't align with the state's judicial college guidance or the U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Such irregularities demonstrate the problems inherent in this unique court system and in places across Louisiana, said Joel Friedman, an emeritus professor of Tulane University in New Orleans, who has taught procedural law for 46 years. The mayor, who's trying to raise money for the city, is in charge of prosecuting these minor criminal offenses and getting fines brought back to the city, he said. There's no accountability, he said. They can do whatever they want. A few people well-versed in mayor courts, including an attorney who was intrigued enough to write a book about them, said Fenton shouldn't allow the mayor to preside over the court. So you can go over this and read this. I did read it all. And I'm not going to bore you with this, but I am going to say that this is extremely, here's the cost of being rude, right? I am going to say that this, as the experts that they've already interviewed, this presents serious problems, and it can have it's a small town, so the chances of uprising are very limited. But when they behave like this, and when the system is rigged, that is when people protest and begin to riot and begin to scream for unfairness to all. So let me know your thoughts and your opinions. Make sure you check out the fullness of that article so you can be well versed. And I will just leave it off there. Much love and peace, everyone.